I want to talk today about building rafters. Kind of goes to that very first video I made. This is just how I do it. This is for people that may be starting out in the business that don't know how to build rafters. I'm talking about from the ground up. Just to give some helpful advice. There's plenty of ways to do it, but this is just how I do it. If you have an area on your job site that's flat enough to build them off of the slab, that is my preferred method of doing it. We have sawhorses that we've built over the years out of just all kinds of different scrap material, but usually the sawhorses that we use to build rafters on, well, they're all the same height. They may be made out of different materials, but they're all the same height, and they're usually pretty wide, about 6 feet or so, because when you get into building big rafters, and the way we build them, when you go to pick them up, you're going to want that length so that they don't flip over. But the way, it's another thing I want to talk about is the pitch. We use a big speed square, and we always use the common side on the pitch. When you look on there, it'll say common and hip. You always use the common side. But if you're shooting for, let's just say, a 2 and 12 pitch, if you get, let's just say you're doing a 40 wide building. The gable end is 40 wide, so you got a 20 and a 20. And if you order your beams that way, 20 foot, you'll have to do the math to figure out what the actual rafter lengths, but we're just going to say for round numbers, you get a 20 footer and you put your square on there, and you got to cut this piece off of it. So what we do is we try to get it. Usually you need to check the flanges on the beams with your squares. Sometimes they come from the factory, they're not always square. So once you square up this flange and this flange here, you can start at the very end here. If it's too messed up, you may just want to come back, make a mark here, put your square on there, make a mark here, and then you'll cut this line and cut this line on the flanges. Then we take any kind of a straight edge and connect the two cuts together, and that's the way you'll cut it. Now, if you're shooting for a 2 and 12, you cut this one, you cut all of them, let's just say, and when you go to put them together on the sawhorses, that may actually be a little more than a 2 and 12, or a little less than a 2 and 12, or it may be exactly a 2 and 12. But if you build them the way I'm going to show you how to build them, it doesn't matter, because they're all going to be the exact same. So once you've got them cut, you take your sawhorses and you lay them out, preferably on the ground. If you do, I will say this, if you don't have good ground and you have to build them on the customer's slab, get you some cheap OSB or some type of scrap wood sheets that you can lay under where you're going to be doing your cutting and welding. Nobody wants to pay what concrete costs today, and then you got a bunch of splatter and stuff on the slab. And don't be spitting tobacco on the slab, on somebody's brand new slab. Anyhow, you get your sawhorses laid out, you cut your rafters each side, so you have them sitting here, and you pull them up together. And like I say, as long as they have a good fit, a weldable fit, you were going for a 2 and 12. This may be just a little under or a little over a 2 and 12, but it doesn't matter. You're going to weld it up. We always like to put our clips, or I'd like to put them, start the first one 6 inches back, and then you've got to do the math on what your rafter length is going to be, plus the width of your column once you get it cut off. And then you've got your eave strut out here on the end, and you're 6 inches back from center. You got to do the math on how far is it from here to the end. And I try to keep my purlins less than 4 feet or less. I don't like to spread them out any further than 4 feet if I can help it. But whatever you do the math on and you come up with, it could be 3 foot, it may end up being 3'7" 5/8, or 4 foot and 1 inch, but I try to keep them around 4 foot. And you're going to set those clips in here. Once you've got it figured out, do the same thing for this side. Measure, it got to be the exact same off of center. And that's why I said in that very first video, we always leave that top part unwelded. We'll weld up the web here and the bottom flange, but we leave the top unwelded until the end. But that way we can hook a tape in there. If you're by yourself, it's especially better. But you're not guessing it, trying to get the exact same spot every time. And so you got your weld plates welded in on both sides. Then that's going to be your first, that's going to be your jig. That one will stay on the sawhorses till you're done building all of them. The next set of rafters, you're going to, what we always do is take a piece of 4-inch square tubing. So let's just say this rafter was built already and is laying on the, and I'll say this, I saw a video the other day of a guy was talking about building trusses. Well, they were actually rafters. A truss would be something like that. A rafter is that. I'll try to use the correct terms. Anyhow, so you got your first rafter laid out. Now you're working on your second one. This one's going to stay on the sawhorses. We will put, and because you have your clips, if you look at it from the side, your I-beam's laying down like this, and then you have your clip welded on, which for most purposes we use a 5x7 clip. So your 5 inches is going to be up, and your 7 is going to be out like this. So that typically we'll have an 8-inch purlin on there, and we flush that up. When it's turned over, your I-beam, your rafter, everything will be flush at the top. It's not sticking up above it. So you got your rafter laying on there. Then we take some, usually about 2 foot pieces of 4-inch square tubing and lay it on top of the jig rafter. That way it gets this next set of rafters up above this clip right here. So now you set your next you've got all these rafters cut off to the side. You just go pick one up with the SkyTrack, set it down, set this one down, you slide them together. Now, where I was going before with all these going to be the same is you're going to line it, the second set and the third and the fourth and the fifth, however many you got, you're going to line it up with the top of this bottom jig here. You hope that the beams are straight and true and all that when you get them. Some vary slightly on the actual width of them, but as long as you get the top the same, the bottom doesn't really matter. What matters is this top. And like I said, you may be shooting for a 2 and 12 and this may be a little over or a little under a 2 and 12, but if you build every rafter the same, it doesn't matter what the pitch is, because they're all going to be the same. So that's my point on that. And we always leave the tails long here because at this point we're waiting on the slab to dry. We're letting it cure, and we haven't gotten our columns stood up yet. But once we do stand our columns up, that's where that first video I made, that's how we're going to get this inside measurement right here of whatever it is. Let's just say 38 feet. If these are 12-inch columns and you're going with a 40-foot wide building, that's going to give you the measurement so that you can cut this rafter to length after you get it built. Now, once you get this second one built, if you got another set of sawhorses, or we actually, what would be nice, really nice, is you put a strap on it, you pick it up with the SkyTrack, you move it over to a second set of sawhorses, and you flip it over on the backside so you can finish welding up the web and the flange. And at that time, you can go ahead and weld that top flange, because you're going to transfer those. If this is not on the end wall and you need clips on both sides of it, now's the time you can have a guy welding clips on the other side and finish welding up the web and the flanges on it. But then when you get done with that one, you can set it off on the ground. It just keeps rolling depending on how many you're building. Then the time will come, once you get the column stood up, you'll have to put them back up on the sawhorses to measure and mark where you're going to cut the rafters off. And again, I mentioned it in the first video, but once you do that, you got it back up here and you've figured everything and you cut and you measure, just double, triple check your measurement, because there's nothing worse than getting a rafter up there and you spent all that time cutting it and you didn't double check your measurements. You know, like I said in that video, we always clamp a clip here to do all the work to hold the tape measure, because you're going to pull it tight. Don't let any slack in your tape. And that clip helps the one guy that's holding the tape measure up against that clip, where he doesn't actually have to pull on it. He just keeping it up there up against that clip. And then the other guy's pulling it as tight as he can get it in a straight line. I know that ain't straight, but straight line to measure here to see if he's 38 feet top and bottom. And if you've marked it correctly with your square, sometimes it's hard to get this top measurement here because you have clips in the way. Although you can clamp a big square, framing square on there to get it up above, so you can take measurements above that, which we do quite a bit. But if it's square and cut 38 feet, if it's 38 feet at this measurement, 38 feet at this measurement, then you know when you when you have that piece of angle iron or that piece of square tubing or whatever you have tacked up there, when you set that rafter down, that it's going to slide right into place, and you're not going to have to fight. You may have to fight it because sometimes these columns, when you go to welding on them, they may draw a little bit, but for the most part, it should slide right down there in place. You got one guy on the SkyTrack setting it. You got another guy on a lift over here and a lift over here, and they're guiding it into place. You get it welded up, and then you go on to the next one. Now, if this was one on the end, this is how we start it. Of course, you wouldn't have any clips here on if this was an end wall one right here. But once we get that first one set, while the SkyTrack is holding it up, we'll take some lightweight beam or rectangular tubing or something, some 6-inch 9-pound or some 2x4 rectangular tubing, and we'll put a piece going back on each side to the ground at an angle. Like if this is, if you're looking at the side of it, here's a column, here's a rafter. We'll have this piece coming down like this on the ground, and then we'll drive a piece of 2-inch square tubing or something. We've got a gas powered driver. We can drive that into the ground several feet, and then we can weld that, tack weld that there because it's tacked up here. And that's how we start with that first rafter and columns braced back. We know that's straight. Then we can let the strap off, and we'll go to the next one and set it. We'll already have our purlin cut and laying on the ground. Now, that's a whole nother video I need to get into, is having your purlin prepped. We'll get an exact measurement from flange to flange of each bay, but we're only going to cut a couple of them the exact measurement. So when the reason for that is that we cut those exact, so you pull the this one's not going anywhere, it's got braced off. This one here is going to be kind of flopping around in the wind until you get a purlin, which we'll do kind of one in the center, this one right here, and then we may do one in the middle over here just to get it temporary, but we'll cut them exact distance between the columns. Now the rest of them will shave off, say, a 1/2 inch. They don't need to be that tight, but if you cut them exact, you know, you pull that up against this one since it's already braced off. Then you're going to go through the next one. You're going to cut them exact, just a few of them. Then the next one, then the next one. But everything's based off of it, and it takes time. You can't rush it to make sure that this very first one is set plumb. Then the rest of them will go just great. You cut a few of them the exact measurement. Then the rest of them you take a 1/2 inch off so that the guys aren't fighting it to get the purlins in, and it really works well. And I will say this, if anybody's got any topics they want to cover, this is mainly geared towards the people that are new to this metal building, not the ones that have been doing it forever and they have their own ways of doing it. And I'm not saying my way is the right way. It's just the way I was either taught or figured out it worked better for me. So if you've got any suggestions on something you're struggling with, or topics you want to talk about, fencing, metal buildings, toolbox, fabrication, anything like that in the shop work, just let me know and I'll try to make a video of it.